And perhaps a few of the women here my age, I'm 47, will remember where they were on the day they heard Lady Diana had died. And I wonder how many of you here in this audience know where you were and what you did on the 27th of September, 2011. I was raised in a wealthy, conservative business family. My father worked for Shell. All his senior peers worked for the corporate sector. Duff, Philips, Unilever, and the like. And so, of course, I too. I was destined to follow in those footsteps, and I studied economics. My second and final thesis was about illegal abortion in the slums of Mexico City, and how that devastated the dreams and dignity of women. See, I had meanwhile discovered that I didn't want to make sure that Shell would find and sell more oil, or that Unilever would produce and sell more sausages. I wanted to make sure that these sausages would end up in the right mouth, and that I could use my big mouth to speak up for people that would not be heard, for the poor. And so for 25 years, for a quarter of a century, I worked as a development practitioner. And I contended myself that I was contributing to a better, more equitable world. Until this happened. He was 5 years old when he handed me this. This was his vision of the world, with no tree left standing, and our oceans spoiled with pollution and waste. And it suddenly dawned on me, after all these years, that I had forgotten about something really important. That it wasn't just about economies that would grow, and that growth would be distributed equitably, but that for economies to thrive and for humanity to survive, we needed to live within the planetary boundaries. Economy, equity, ecology. The triple E of global prosperity, and what they call the Holy Trinity of sustainable development. And as world leaders, a month from now, we'll gather in Rio to discuss global sustainability. Let's see where we have come since the first summit on sustainable development. Let's begin with the economy. Well done. Output quadrupled since 1950. Half of the output is now produced in developing countries. Asia has seen growth figures tremendous. And Africa now has growth figures that us in Europe can only dream of. Let's look at equity. It's a bit more of a mixed bag, shall we say. Yes, we've had progress. We've reduced hunger, and we've reduced extreme poverty. We're doing a bit better in bringing primary education and safe drinking water. But we have a bloody long agenda of unfinished business, particularly on gender equality and sexual and reproductive health and rights for women. In making sure that for 1 in 6 women in Niger and Afghanistan, pregnancy is not a death penalty. And then let's look at the third pillar of sustainable development, ecology. Progress? Progress? You must be kidding yourself. About every indicator we can think of points towards a worsening trend. If that would be the value of your stock portfolio, you would all be having nightmares by now. Biodiversity, deforestation, climate change, plastic soup, ocean acidification, and I can continue. In statistical jargon, we call this the hockey stick curve. There's a gradual change, and then there's this fast acceleration. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that hockey stick is going to hit us, and it's going to hit us hard, and it's going to hit us soon. But it will hit the poor more than anybody else. Let's look at biodiversity, shall we? Since 1970, 30% of biodiversity has been degraded. In Latin America, that figure rises to a staggering 60%. Now you may say, oh well, the dinosaurs died out. Sure, that's true. But the dinosaurs died out because of a natural phenomenon, the impact of a meteorite. And this is the first time in the planetary history that destruction is caused by mankind. Tropical rainforests, lungs of the world, home to 50% of species. Yet deforestation is causing 20% of CO2 emissions. 20%. That's more CO2 emissions than all forms of transport in the air, on the sea, on the roads taken together. And you know why? Because in our economy, we value what we can sell. And so, a dead tree is worth more than a tree left standing. Now, very often we don't know what the function of a plant or an animal in an ecosystem is until it's gone. Michael was talking about plankton. Let me give you another example of Eastern Africa, where I worked for many years. They were researching nutritional status of young children, and they couldn't figure out why it was slowly deteriorating until they looked at wildlife. In the years of Idi Amin and Obote, wildlife was slaughtered randomly, including hippos. Now, hippos have a very funny toilet behavior. I don't know who's familiar. But they use their tail to disperse excreta in the water. That is staple food of fish. No hippos, no fish food. No fish food, no fish. No fish, health problems in children. That is what happens when you change one part of the ecosystem and you don't know what the consequence will be. And while this is an example at local level, bear in mind that 60% of ecosystems by now has been degraded. And soon these effects will happen at a global level. And as biodiversity is slowly degrading, so too our consumption of natural resources is becoming unsustainable. Take water. Despite images of torrential rains and floods, in 2025, that is not even 15 years from now, 2/3 of mankind will live in situations that we call water-stressed. And a staggering 2.5 billion people will live in a situation of absolute water scarcity, which means that there is so little water that it will impede social and economic development. I'm not just talking here about the current 4 people each minute, mostly children, that die because of lack of safe drinking water. That's 72 by the time I'm done with my talk. But economy needs water too. Industry is a source of growth, and we need growth for countries to grow out of poverty. But industry is also a major consumer of water. And what will we do? Energy uses a lot of water. And farmers need water for their production and for their income. And so how are we going to feed 9 billion people that we shall be in 2050, knowing that 70% of fresh water is used for irrigation, and that we must produce more food with a whole lot less water, and with 60% of ecosystems being degraded? Let's look at energy. Growth needs energy. from manufacturing, to transport goods, to produce food. We expect a lot of growth. And so, demand for energy is set to rise by more than 50% in just 15 years. More than 50% in just 15 years. What type of energy shall we have, do you think? Will it be renewable? Or shall it be fossil fuel based? It's my hunch that it will be fossil fuels. Knowing that in 2008 we funded, subsidized fossil fuels with a staggering $650 billion. And you may say, But again, it is the poor that are hardest hit. It's the poor people living in the deltas in Mozambique and Bangladesh. Or take the example of the Mekong Region in Vietnam. If climate change goes unabated, the Mekong region will flood, and it's the regional rice bowl of Asia, leading to regional food insecurity. 20 million people will be displaced, and the GDP will go down by an approximate 5%. Now, you may say to me, doomsday scenario. You're not taking into account change, technology, innovation, R&D. And I would say, you're right, I agree. There is a glimmer of hope. But that glimmer of hope I have is with the private sector, where I see energy and focus and drive and determination to reduce the use of natural resources. And perhaps in hindsight, it wasn't such a smart decision after all not to have joined Unilever. We have 4 Dutch companies, among which Unilever, in the top 10 of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. 4 Dutch companies in the top 10 of the world. And so Bill Clinton was right when he came here many years ago and he said of my country, small country, big footprint. And he meant that as a compliment. But it has since then taken on a different meaning. Remember the 27th of September 2011? It is what we call nowadays Earth Overshoot Day. It is the day by which we use so much in natural resources that we go beyond the natural capacity of Earth to replenish itself. Water, energy, forests, clean air. As a global world community, we are now using 1.3 Earth. And I thought we had only 1. And we here, you and me, Dutch, we bear a particular responsibility. We rank a sad, sad number 9 in the world list of ecological footprints. The ecological footprint which measures how much resources, how much land and water was used to produce what we consume, food, timber, for infrastructure, and to absorb the CO2 that we generate. And if in 2050 we have 9 billion people, each living the life we have, and who can deny them the right to dream, to have our lifestyle? Isn't it bloody comfortable? We would need 3.5 Earth. Why is it that we are the first generation to, rather than sacrificing ourselves for our children's future, we sacrifice our children's future for ourselves? And as Paul Gilding, the Australian ex-director of Greenpeace, said, the answer is remarkably simple. When the problem is so big that it requires transformative change, the natural response is denial. And it is what I get a lot. I get to see many people that say, This is too big for me. I can't deal with it. Whatever I do, it will have no impact. I am but a small molecule in a big, bad world. And they take their duvet, put it over their head, pretend it's just not there, and dream on. And I would like to say to these people, get up, stand up, don't forget to fight, because surely this is worth fighting for. And each of us here can make a contribution, because the beauty of the fact that we are a big part of the problem, it's our consumption, means that we can be part of the solution too. Remember that the food you ate last night, I guess, how many of you had steak last night? Raise your hand. Any idea how much water was used to produce that steak? 50? 500? 5,000 liters? Going by the assumption that you had a decent-sized steak, it is probably closer to 5,000 liters. You can make a difference. Each bite less, I would say, at a time. The Dutch Environment Assessment Agency also made an interesting calculation that I think you should know of. If all people, you and me, would simply abide by the advice of the World Health Organization on animal protein intake, that is how much meat and cheese and milk we use, we would solve 20 to 30% of the climate change problem. And if we would simply reduce those fossil fuel subsidies, we could gain another 10%. And if we all were to buy sustainable forest and have a global deal to end deforestation, we could well stay below that scary 2-degree tipping point. And with Dutch water technology, we can and we shall be able to reduce the water imprint and footprint of agriculture. You see, I firmly believe that it is all of us here that have a responsibility. Whether you're the CEO of Unilever or a corporate employee, are you proud of what you make? It is you in the end who decide what you make and how you make it. It is me and you as a consumer who decides what product shall we buy. And it is you and me when we're rich enough, as shareholders, or as constituents who will cast our vote. It is us who decide what policies in future we will refuse. See, I'm not a big fan of the duvet. I don't think we should wait for press, for politicians, or for the general public to change the system. We are the system. And as much as I believe in the process in Rio, as I will lead the Dutch delegation before the politicians arrive, as much as I believe with my blood and my sweat and my damn hard work in what we will do there, I equally firmly believe it is not just world leaders that can bring the balance between economy, equity, and ecology. It is not so much the powers that be. Sustainable development, first and foremost, is about you and about me. Thank you.